How does fascism develop? A young teacher decides to conduct an unusual experiment. He wants to prove to his students that the susceptibility to fascist thinking and acting is always everywhere present. Yet the movement that he starts threatens to overrule both him and his presets. The experiment goes out of control. Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Heir's Lair. I'm your host, Jonathan Taylor. Today's video, if I've timed this correctly, will come out 2 days after the anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe. And in order to mark the occasion, I thought I would take a look at a book that would be topical. And the book I have chosen to that end is the modern classic known as The Wave by Martin Roux. And in case you're wondering, this is the German edition, because yes, I've read it in German. And it was actually somewhat interesting to, kind of go through some of the expressions this book uses and try to translate them back into English in order to see how that would actually come across. But really, that's more of that's more the kind of thing that would only interest me and those who are in a similar position to me. So I'm just gonna mention this happened and now move on to the things that I think most people would actually be interested about when talking about a modern classic. This is not the first book that I have called classic that I have reviewed this year, and given the bar that book set, it is interesting. I thought it would be interesting to see if this one compares, even if only slightly. And well, the TLDW for this review is that this book is fit for purpose. It knows how to use perspectives or points of view in order to emphasize the topics and themes that it wants to go for, and the author is quite effectively capable of thinking one step ahead and understanding what kind of actions and consequences result from from the things that he is portraying within this book. There is still a strange tension that that results when looking at this book from a constructive standpoint, because it tries to simultaneously be both topical and relatable, and it doesn't really manage to pull both of those off, which ends up creating a strange level of tension within it that ages it in a peculiar way. Nevertheless, if you are ever interested in an early 80s nostalgia read that nevertheless manages to cover some complex themes quite effectively, or some dark themes quite effectively, then this book might befit your interest better than most others. And now that I'm done with the generics of the book, it's time I delve a little bit into the specifics. The story of this book is told primarily from two perspectives. The first one being that of Laurie Saunders, the editor-in-chief of Gordon High School's newspaper, and Ben Ross, her history teacher. When Ben's class reaches the lesson on Nazi Germany, Laurie finds herself asking the obvious question: why didn't regular Germans oppose the Nazis? Unable to find a satisfying answer on the spot, Ben instead decides to turn his class into a fascist organization in order to give his students first-hand experience and expertise in terms of how it is that these organizations manifest. This book, I have to give some background info on it now. Namely the fact that this book is in fact in the novelization of a made-for-TV movie which is based on a similar experiment, and a real-life history teacher named Ron Jones has attempted to implement for similar purposes. Nevertheless, I think it is safe to say that this book has overcome its inspirations, at least in terms of popularity, and it is quite easy to see why. Even though I've read a translated version, I did translate it back into English in my head, more or less, while reading it, and I found it to be I found it to have an interesting ease and use of language, something that allowed it to present its topic in a more accessible way, befitting a younger audience, while not really skimming on the things that make it intriguing or relevant. It still manages to present fascism in a manner that is both self-sufficient and relatable. Self-sufficient or self-contained. Pick out whichever you think fits best. As someone who is terminally online, however, I do have to say I find myself having some issues with the way fascism is portrayed within this book. I am willing to accept that the experiment the book describes has certain limits due to its setting. However, it still portrays fascism as a fad, as simply a hot new trend that went off the rails, all the while completely ignoring the fact that it is in fact those rails that make fascism possible in the first place. Because what people don't really get about fascism is that it is not a usurpation or a discontinuation of the status quo. It is the status quo as armor and bludgeon. It is a view of change as decay rather than change as growth. And for some reason, it is that conceptual cognitive closure that the book completely ignores in its portrayal of fascism, opting to instead talk about fanaticism as well as the divide between insider and outsider as its defining features, even though that is not strictly speaking accurate. It could be I could accept the perspective that that fascism is presented this way in order for it to be relatable to its young audience, for whom cliques and volatile, unstable soft power dynamics are basically an everyday fact of their social life. But I still think the representation that fascism is given within this book is overly simplistic. I am, however, willing to accept that is not entirely this book's fault, because keep in mind this is an adaptation of an experiment meant to emulate one particular realization of fascism. So there are lots of points along this chain where various errors or decontextualizations could have occurred, thereby making the entire thing, and thereby rendering the entire thing in the manner that I have presented it. So while I don't blame the book for all the faults it falls into when presenting fascism, I do, however, still fault it for not really addressing any of these faults in a meaningful way. That being said, while I find myself displeased with the way this book handles its political portrayals, the way this book is put together, so looking at this book from a story crafting perspective, makes it shine through, makes its strengths shine through quite a bit more effectively. I already mentioned the presentation and how it's able to use language in order to weave its themes. So I thought I would delve. So now it's time I go a little bit further and talk about, for example, the characterization, which is which is done quite well, and not just from the perspective, and not just when looking at the um, you know the at the main characters and how they develop over the course of this book. This book actually gives a lot of definition and development to side characters as well, allowing them to allowing them and their abilities to be allowing them and their changes more or less to be highlighted as this as this new phenomenon, as this new development ends up I shouldn't say ends up engulfing the setting, but as they seek to expand it in such a way as to engulf the setting and what it is about the movement that really draws them into it and turns them into its supporters. The plotting is done very much going off that, and in such a way as to strengthen this initial point, because it comes across as somewhat soft, and it allows more of an exploratory way of it pencils out an exploratory way of presenting the story rather than a set of strict rules by which it has by which it builds its own by which it builds its narratives and its developments, which ultimately makes it seem more more chaotic indeed, but also more naturalistic, more similar to how such an organization would actually develop IRL. Which, given such an organization actually did develop IRL, yeah, not surprising. Also, the way the book uses perspectives is very intriguing, and it manages to both immerse the reader, but also continually keep them guessing, keep them wondering what next is going to come, and it is that contrast of both keeping the reader informed, also maintaining the tension that I think really makes this book quite memorable. Overall, this modern classic very much lives up to its legacy through its very effective use of imagery and grit. Very effective and very appropriate. I should also say that. My final rating for The Wave is a 4 out of 5. And that was my review. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed it, well then please like the video, maybe even share it wherever you think other people will also like the video. If there is anything you'd like to add to the book itself or to my review of it, that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. And ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. My books, the first of my own Heir to the Empire series, The Next Generation and the Path Not Taken, are available at various book retailers under their respective master links in the description down below. Right past my social media links, which I also suggest you check out should you choose to. Additionally, you have the option of supporting me on Patreon, where depending on the level at which you pledge, you will receive various perks, the specifics of which I will allow you to discover for yourselves. I also have a second channel where I talk about whatever else interests me. So if you want to hear my opinion about topics not related to books or literature, that's pretty much where you'll have to go. If you would instead want to hear me, still talking about books and literature, well, then you can go through my backlog on this channel and see as many of my book reviews, writing advice, and lore videos as you'd be interested to. Or you can do whatever else you want with your day, because it is your day after all. Until next time, I am Jonathan Taylor, and this has been the Heir's Lair.